and welcome to another episode of WhipChat. My name is Christian, and on this episode, I am talking to none other than Tony Nugent. Hello, and welcome to the show, Tony.
Hi, Christian. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show and chatting with me about the wonderful craftsmanship that you do with making whips. For those that don't know, Tony is indeed a master craftsman and a master whip maker and an artist. Indeed, I have through my research, have seen that you have done a number of different types of art, and not the least of which is, of course, your beautiful whips that you make. And we'll be talking about that in detail. And so you have been making whips for what is it? It's decades now, correct?
From 76.
So, oh my goodness.
Mm.
So that's almost what, 50 years?
Oh,
40,
going on 50 years.
going on 50 years. Oh my goodness.
I've had a couple of small breaks in that time, um, but I've never really taken well to absolute retirement.
Yeah.
Never agreed with me, so I tend to tinker.
Like to stay busy.
Yeah.
What is it about it that keeps your mind active, or is it oh, you have new ideas? What is it about it that you like to tinker with?
I've often wondered, I think it's more obsession. I think it's obsession.
Okay.
And it's also the fact I've been doing it so long, most of my adult life. So it's like that and painting. They're my two passions.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine getting up each day without one of them.
Wow. What is that? What does that feel like? That passion when you have the need
Uh,
to that. What is that? Can you describe that feeling?
um, I think it's a kind of excitement that
Okay.
overcomes me at times when I'm going into a new project. Um, yeah.
It, do you have certain inspirations that really ignite that excitement?
Well, probably my friends. My friends are always an inspiration.
Yeah,
The whip making community in itself.
sure.
And I'm always working on new ideas.
Oh, sure.
I love the mechanics of a bullwhip, for instance. So
Hmm.
I love trying to trying to modify things like transitions, how to make them firmer,
Okay.
more durable over time,
Hmm.
and just that in whips, making whips more durable and
Sure.
easy to use. Also, that's the other thing. A whip that's not laborious to throw around. I think that's important.
Yes, yes. And I actually have a video from our mutual friend Keith, and that I want to show in a minute of him doing some amazing things with it, flowing around, which is goes right back to that. Um, so it really sounds like there's a whole realm of things that could inspire you when it comes to making a bullwhip, certainly. Or
Yes, you just mentioned Keith. Keith's been an incredible inspiration for me.
yeah,
We talk bullwhips all day, nearly every day. I mean, that's our passion. So um, a lot of my recent work has been more of a it's been like a joint project, I suppose.
yeah.
Yeah.
How so? How is it? How so joined?
Oh well, I'm watching probably one of the best bullwhip users out there today, and uh, he's able to suggest things, but just being able to see the whip in action um, tells me a lot about the way the whip's handling.
Yeah.
Hmm. Which
So
one's that?
so this is I believe this is the one that you just sent to Keith recently.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
while you were talking about it, I just wanted to bring it up on the screen. Um, yeah, I mean, yes, Keith is absolutely one of the best bullwhip handlers these days. I would agree with that. And a whip like this certainly can help him be expressive in what he does. What sort of feedback do you get from someone like Keith that inspires you, that determines, might maybe changes what you're going to do?
Well, for instance, look at the Turk's head on that. It's more elongated, so
Yeah,
that's more of an ergonomic grip. Um, for example, whips traditionally normally don't have that length of Turk's head, so this is a new thing or a newer thing that's been creeping into stock whips as well. Longer, more ergonomic Turk's heads definitely make a difference to some performers, anyway.
sure. Sure, I could see that, and I know that reading through some of the other older books from Ron Edwards and so forth, there was the more flat style Turk's head that is folded over like a crown knot almost.
Yeah,
That very much not ergonomic like this at all.
no,
So with so like Keith holds it with it palmed, and
yes.
he's working it that way. Do other people hold it differently, and you would make things differently for those different grips? So I was just mentioning that I had seen on some stock whips that there's like a crown knot that's folded over at the end, and it's more of a stop than something you put on
Yes,
the palm.
yes, and I think they were quite common. Those kind of Turk's heads were quite common when I started. And the look of them, you'd think a whip was held like a hammer, and that was like a stopper.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's not, as we know. So I've tried to make them more comfortable in the palm, really,
yeah. It looks
because it is
gorgeous,
a more
and
joint. That's how it works in the hand.
right, like a ball and socket. Exactly. That's and Keith speaks very highly of it. Um, are there other changes? You mentioned that the transition earlier, that you have changed that over time, made it stronger. What are some of the changes you've gone through? If you don't mind sharing some of those, the evolution of the Tony Nugent transition, what, without sharing any secrets, but what's something you're proud of there with the way it's changed? And we're back from a brief
Mm,
technical glitch. Welcome back, Tony, and the eternal
mm,
curse of technology on
mm.
us all.
Oh, it's a beauty, isn't it?
It is. But it
Mm.
allows us to speak all the way across the world, which is quite
It
wonderful.
does. It does. It connects us, so it's fantastic. Mm.
Yes, exactly. And it allows us to do like this podcast and continue to share the joy of whip making and this wonderful hobby of whips in general. We were talking a little bit about your how you've changed and how you are inspired by various technical aspects in
Mm.
getting better with whip making. And you mentioned briefly the transition period, and you and I have mentioned it briefly on different things that you've tried over the years. Back many years ago, you were using a spring, or you had tried
Yeah.
a spring in the
Mm.
transition.
Yeah.
Can you
Springs are quite successful. Yeah.
yeah. How has that
Yeah.
changed over the years? And if you don't mind, I don't want you to spoil any trade secrets per
I
se.
don't. I really doubt if there are any, but I think what it's done is what I've seen personally is when I started, um, every third bullwhip I made was a bullwhip. Uh,
Okay.
Bullwhips were quite popular. Uh, I'd often, as a kid, I'd go into the saddleries and look at different bullwhips, buy them. Uh, and it was one of those things I noticed in the transitions. They were quite stiff,
Yeah.
uh, quite rigid. With a short handle, that definitely comes in handy. Um, and springs were all the go. Now there seems to be a little bit more attention back on binding, just lashing the transition and compressing the leather where it
Hmm.
comes off the spike. So, but the other thing I got to mention is transitions vary from person to person. Um, One person I find favors a very rigid transition, and another person might want a softer transition with a longer handle, for
Sure.
instance.
Sure.
Mm.
I've got a couple of examples here that I was going to ask you about as well for that very reason. Um, First off, I have a Joe Strain,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
is nice, and it's got, well, let me make this a bit wider so we can see it. So it's got a fairly rigid transition. That's
Yes.
which is quite nice. Um, but then I also have one from Blake Bruning from Trinity Whip Company, and he has his DeLongis model, and it's got a much softer transition
Yep.
that suits the style that Anthony likes to use.
Yes.
So
Hmm.
it's interesting to see how different people change it up. And do you primarily make a transition the Tony Nugent way, or do you really try to talk to the person you're selling it to and customize it per person per whip?
Yeah. Great question. Both. I've got to
Okay.
take two things into consideration. I think it's important when you're custom designing a whip to make it in accordance with the buyer. There's no use making a
Sure.
whip your way and only your way, because it's not going to get you many customers in the end. So it pays to fulfill their needs. So that's what I try to do. And in every commission I try to take into consideration the way they use whips.
Hmm.
A lot of them are performers, so I can get to see how they work with a whip and then try to make it to suit their needs.
Sure. So, like, I mean, since we were just talking about Keith, not to make this the Keith show. Oh, yeah, you have one right
Yeah.
there.
Oh,
Go ahead.
yeah. This is what I was showing. Now, this is a what I call a modified transition, and you can see how, you know, that's quite firm out to about there. Then it gradually gets stiffer right towards
I see.
the spike itself.
So almost what, another 8 inches or so.
Well,
I would say.
this is a 7-foot bullwhip, so the transition on this one comes out to about 7 inches. So it's
Oh, wow.
gradual.
Okay.
The tensioning lessens as you come out.
And you're primarily using binding to accomplish that?
That's what I'm using at the moment. I'm not using springs. I'm very tempted to look back into investigating springs because springs have changed a lot.
Yes, yes. With the nylon, it's interesting to see people exploring lots of different materials and products as well. And I've seen for the transition, some people using heat shrink tubing, like a rubber that you heat up and it shrinks around it. And they'll put either one or more layers over the first bit of the transition over the core there. So it's just interesting to see how that's
Yeah,
rating different.
yeah. Well, it works on a similar principle. It's about trying to compress that area where it does come off the spike. It's that transition area, which is, I suppose, when you look at it under a microscope, it might look a little bit like a stacked heeled leather boot, where it's quite compressed.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, I
Mm,
could see that. I've seen some
mm.
cross sections of whips that have been cut open, either intentionally or maybe with a cow stepping on it or something. And
Yes.
that's a great description, like a stacked leather boot.
Hmm.
Do you find making bullwhips to be a particular, I don't know, passion or a versus? It seems like so many Australian whip makers make stock whips
Yeah.
as their primary whip, but yet so many of your beautiful whips I've seen are indeed bullwhips.
Yeah. I think my passion is definitely with both. I find them both incredible ways of expressing myself. Stock whips have their own particular um, classical shape that I've always liked. I can't say I have a favourite as a whip maker. I
Fair enough.
like them both. Yeah, they're both very very important.
Do you find that, I don't know what you want to call it, the community, there is any sort of bias or other whip makers look down in certain parts of the world? Like, it seems like definitely some whip makers are very pro stock whip only as like the real whip. The bull whips are the American whip, and that's just kind of they're strange over there. But um
Well, that's sad.
I
Mm,
think
mm,
so too,
mm,
being a proud
mm,
American
mm.
myself. And
Yeah.
I love both of them.
Mm.
Have you found any stigma or any pro cons in the whip
Yeah.
industry there?
Yeah, I think there is a bit there. I mean, I know some whip makers might try to avoid making bull whips at times. So, there is that side of it. There's more time involved in making a bull whip. Say your average stock whip might take 2 days to make. Well, your average bull whip be 3 days. So it's a longer journey. And I
Sure.
think that sometimes deters whip makers, but also the dynamics involved in a bullwhip. And I think that often has a lot to do with when you might have started whip making. Were bullwhips popular then, or weren't they?
Yes.
10 years after I started, bullwhips tended to recede a bit in sales. They just more or less vanished for some time. Now, probably in the last 10 or 20 years, there's been a lot more of a resurgence of interest. So as a whip maker, I found it quite interesting. Interesting area to pursue.
Yes. I mean, clearly you have excelled at it as well. You make such a beautiful whip.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Uh, I'd like to go back a little bit to the beginning. When you got started, can you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to make those first whips and where you saw those and how you learned?
Yeah. I often think about that myself. And on recollection, I could say I used to enjoy watching my uncle train his lions. He was a circus performer. So,
Wow.
growing up looking at that always fascinated me. Also, my grandfather was a stockman, so I couldn't avoid that one also.
Yeah, sure.
So there was that interest. I never pictured myself as a whip maker. I never figured I'd be making whips until now. So it's something it happened quite accidentally in some ways. It's just something that developed. It was an interest.
Yeah. What sort of things did you I mean, I'd like to talk about each of those two people that were so
Mm,
influential. Did
mm.
they have like your uncle that was the circus performer? What was his name?
Mervyn King.
Mervyn King. When
Mm.
Mervyn, I don't know, come around for the family reunion, I mean, would he bring the whips? Would you go watch him at the circus? Tell me a little
Well,
bit about that.
well, um, when I'd go to see him, it was the other performers with the whips that I'd go and watch. Mervyn was an
Wow.
animal trainer, and even though he used whips, he probably when training big cats, for instance,
Mhm.
I normally only saw him with a stick.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was watching people like Lorraine Ashton. She was a great whip performer
Okay.
when I was growing up. So watching her and looking at whips carefully over the years. At one time, I reverse engineered a whole bunch of damaged whips, and
Interesting.
that was my insight. Getting to seeing the internals of a whip and
Mhm.
being able to make that.
That I bet that was inspiring, especially once you
Yeah.
realize the complexity to actually recreate that.
Yes. Yeah. So it started there. Um,
Sure. And then you said your father or the another uncle that was the stockman?
yeah. My grandfather was
Your
a
grandfather,
stockman.
thank you.
Hmm.
And, I mean, obviously, they need a whip that'll survive the trail.
Hmm.
Was, was he a really good, whip cracker as well, or was he very much utilitarian? Tell me about him a little bit.
Uh, well, he used whips just in a practical sense. Um, I think it was more uh, being introduced to whips in general.
Gotcha.
Uh, yeah, I think it's like a lot of things. Passions grow, and my passion grew over time with being exposed, probably more to other whip makers. and
Oh,
sharing our passion. Yeah, yeah. I used to spend a lot of time with a whip maker called Morris Doohan. So we spent a lot of time going on. We'd often go on these tours, like road trips in the cars, and go and meet other whip makers.
wow.
And that was, that was fun. That was the other thing at the time that inspired me.
Sure. It reminds me of some of the things like Adam Winrich has done over the years when I've talked to
Yeah,
him, going out and
and
meeting people.
yes, and Adam is another source of that inspiration. Watching Adam's a very passionate man. So you
Indeed.
know, passion is as they say, it's we catch it.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Who were some of the people that you went on road trips to visit, and what sort of other whip makers?
Ah,
Any of those stand out,
oh,
interesting?
oh, we went and stayed with a man called Bruce Cull. At one time, we went and had dinner with him and spent some time with him. That was a wonderful time. We'd go to places like Coonan's Tannery. Coonan's Tannery was probably one of the last tanneries in the country to make pit tanned kangaroo hide, which
Wow.
was outstanding leather. It was probably one of the nicer leathers you could come across. Because of being pit tanned, there is pollution when you
Oh,
empty the pits, and maybe that had a little bit to do with them closing down. I don't know, but that was fun. Just seeing the process that went into
yeah.
tanning a kangaroo hide. Yeah,
Have
so we
you
went on road trips like that.
have you tried your hand at tanning or shooting any of that
No,
processing part of it?
no, I haven't shot or bothered tanning them. I've never really had the time. I'll leave that to people a little bit more experienced.
Sure.
It
Yeah, I've
does take a lot of time
yeah. Yes, it
preparing
certainly
a,
does.
preparing a skin and tanning it.
Yeah, I imagine. It's a whole different, skill set as well, and I'm
Absolutely.
yeah, I would love to see that, but I don't. It seems like a process that's a little overwhelming. I heard you knew, Charlie Hassett as well?
Yeah, Charlie was a good friend. Um, yeah, Charlie was probably another very inspiring uh, component in my life. Charlie was someone that had a vast array of stories he could tell you,
Yeah.
and I would often just talk on the phone sometimes to Charlie for 6 hours. I mean,
Oh my
uh,
goodness.
things like that. That is definitely passion.
Yes, I love that.
Mm, mm.
Any of those stories stand out in your mind as just like, that's Charlie?
Yeah, yeah. Some of them do. I remember him once telling me about his uncle Charlie Senior,
Mhm.
who it was back in the day where people would go out drinking, take their whips or whatever. He was telling me about his uncle after they'd had a few drinks, went to take a cigarette out of a guy's mouth with the whip and hit the guy's nose and opened it up like a ripe tomato. He said. So
Oh,
so
no.
so that image is always stuck in my mind.
Ouch. Oh my
Mm,
goodness. I imagine that, yeah, that would be make an impression on a young man as well as the people
yeah,
involved.
yeah. And Charlie was a whip cracker, a whip maker, and a whip cracker. I mean, he did both and incredibly well. So um, Charlie was a great inspiration for me.
What sort of, are there any particular tips you remember getting from like him? Let's just use Charlie as an example when we're talking about him. Like something that he told you that today when you're making a whip, you're like, this is how Charlie said to do it. Like, does that still cross your mind sometimes?
Yes, yeah, yes. The transition. I can often hear that voice. I can often still hear Charlie's voice telling me, "This is how we do it. This is how it's." You know, uh, I love that about Charlie. It was very. This is how we do it, and I followed suit.
Yeah. I mean,
Mm,
clearly
mm,
it's paid off as
mhm,
well.
Yeah.
An excellent whip. Um, are there other, I don't know, well-known other inspirations you've had and influencers that you've had as you were learning how to do this, or was a lot of
Mm.
it that reverse engineering over the years?
A lot of what was reverse engineering. When I started, when I first started making whips, it was so hard to find someone who would share anything.
Oh, yeah.
Whip makers, very much guarded their secrets or guarded their knowledge. It
Mhm.
wasn't something. Today you can look online and you can talk to anyone, and people are quite open about their methods. It wasn't like that at all. Um, it was this common kind of response. It's if you ask them a question, you would often be met with this. Well, that's for me to know and you to find out. That was often a very common um,
Oh my.
attitude. Yeah, so meeting other whip makers, I think that's how a lot of my knowledge accumulated and developed.
Sure. Thank you for sticking with it. That sounds really frustrating.
Hmm.
It's such a
It was. It was funny too, because at the same time, it does someone like myself. It probably made me more. It made me more interested in pursuing it. It's like a
really
challenge. When someone throws that at you, then it becomes a challenge. Find out what goes into it. You know, find out the dynamics of a whip and how to construct one.
huh, that's fascinating. How do you think
Hmm.
that's going to change what we have now? This wasn't a prepared question. It just occurred to me while you're talking about it. The world of the new generation of whip makers now,
Yeah,
they do have so much information at their fingertips. They have so
they
many
do.
makers, uh, so many different people tell you the right way to do it.
Yes,
So
yeah.
many different right ways. How do you think that's going to impact the next generation of whips that we're seeing?
I think it'll diversify them, make them more interesting because you're going to have different methodologies. There is no right way and there is no wrong way. I've learned that there are some ways that are better, um, but I doubt there are you know black and white, right and wrong. Um,
Sure.
mm.
Yeah, I mean, they all have to they should taper. Like, you should have
Yeah,
energy. It
that's
should
the main
crack.
conformity. The main conformity is it's a tapered cylinder of interlocking strands. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but even I forget the name of the whip. They start out with a square plat at the first bit. Is it Hungarian or one of those that has
Oh yes, yes, the Hungarian, the whip with all the bells and stuff on it. Is that the one you're talking about?
that one also, it's still they all still taper, but it's not even a
Mm.
cylinder at the beginning. It's actually
Yeah.
rectangular or square. So it's fascinating
Yes.
to see how different it is and how people are incorporating these different ideas. At the LA WhipCon, there was a girl there that was making wonderful whips, and she made her keepers quite large for her
Yeah.
stock whips, and they would lose contact between the thong and the whip if you moved it a certain way,
Oh
much
yes.
like
Yeah.
a Hungarian whip would do. So it felt like you were using one of those sort of whips, and she liked it. And it was if you wanted that style of whip, I mean, she would be the person to go to. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I found that fascinating. That I mean, if she was studying under a traditional whip maker in either America or Australia, I doubt she would have had that influence. But that's fascinating. Um, it seems like you also do a lot of really high plat count on the whips that you make. Do you enjoy doing that? Do you like doing the higher plat count stuff?
Put it like this: we'll call it difficult pleasure. It, it's it's an obsession. That's what it is. It's an obsession.
Sure.
I don't like them any more than um, doing less accounts, um, but I find it probably more interesting. So I think
Mm,
that's the bottom line today. What keeps me interested, and it's those whips with a lot of strands and patterns that keep me interested.
sure, sure. Are there some whip makers out there that you look up to that they do, especially with the higher plat count stuff that you respect and I don't know, learn from those sort of things?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There's a vast array of them, actually. My friend Chris Barr,
Oh
for
yes.
one. I mean, I really admire his stuff. Uh, Peter Thorndike,
Oh, excellent.
another
Yeah.
another brilliant whip maker. Then you've got Blake Gorey from the United States, another outstanding whip maker. I mean, I've got no shortage of great whip makers to model myself around.
Sure. And
Mm.
when I have spoken to each of them, I hear the same about you, that they look up to you as well in their own way. So
Oh,
it's really interesting. Not to put words in their mouths, so nobody get upset with me. But I can, when I've mentioned your name, there is definitely respect there. Some are very much vocal about it, but I can definitely see that. And so you have made quite the impact on the community, and I appreciate your contribution for sure.
oh, you're welcome. No, it's been interesting.
Yeah, I
Mm.
imagine so. What are some of the when you think back over your career, are there some particularly interesting things that like that was really a fascinating moment? Um,
Mm.
is there something that stands out?
Ah, there was a time I had a friend of mine he was a bullock driver, and
Okay.
he made his own bullock whips and had his own bullock team.
Mhm.
One of the things that came about was he taught me how to use a bullock team, you know,
Oh, wow.
and make bullock whips. So making bullock whips was one of those things I suppose I investigated for about 10 years. The same bullocky, John, oh, trying to think of his last name. Anyway, he did a trip over the Sydney Harbour Bridge with his bullock team during the bicentenary, and I
Wow.
made him a whip for that. And just that whole period was a fascinating period in my life. Um, just learning the power of using a bullock team and the
Wow.
dynamics of bullock whips.
What I really know very little about that. Can you describe that process a bit? What does it
Mm.
mean to use a bullock team?
Well, first of all, you've got to know all your bullocks by name. That they tend to have that rapport with their animals.
Wow.
Um, so they're incredibly responsive animals, considering it's a cow. But what he showed me, John Mills, his name was John
Yeah,
Mills.
Mills.
Anyway, he'd have his bullock team there. He'd get this great big long chain, wrap it round the base of a big lantana, um, you know, big lantana bush. Could
Mhm.
be half an acre, in width. He'd wrap the
Oh,
chain around that and pull the whole lot out with a bullock team.
oh
You
my
know,
goodness. That's a
pretty
lot of
much what
power.
you'd use. Yeah, that today you'd use a bulldozer to do the same thing. So I found that fascinating how our forefathers cleared the land. I mean, it's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. That it is very interesting. I live in Fort Worth, Texas, and there's a lot of areas that have been cleared that used to not be cleared, and I've had similar thoughts. Like, I wonder how they did that before bulldozers.
Yeah.
That I guess that is the way. Um,
Mm.
I was saw an article on when I was doing a bit of research about you that there was one point that you were having your whips in most saddleries across New South Wales. It
Mm.
well, that must have been
I
a
don't know
requirement.
about most, but a lot of salaries.
A
When I
lot.
start
Okay.
when I started, probably the bulk of my work was salaries. Uh,
Okay.
yeah,
It
and
was
then
whips though, but
yeah,
in the
with
saddlery.
whips, you, selling them to the salaries.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so salaries would often have an assortment of whips in their window, and most of my whips were sold like that. And then probably in the 80s, more people started to collect whips. And so I had collectors like Kelvin Barton was one. Ron
Hmm.
Edwards was another one. So
Sure.
they were people that kept me busy in work.
Was there any? Was it just business? Do you think, or was there a bit of a pride about seeing your work
Oh
being
no,
very?
I think it was more than just business. I think collectors have a deep love of the aesthetics. That's
Oh,
without a doubt.
I mean, and obviously, I mean, you are an artist. You mentioned painting a couple of times.
Mm.
Like that is not something that you do just to turn the crank, unless you're just painting a house, I suppose.
No, it's very different. Yeah.
Very, very different indeed. And I can see how being able to provide something to someone who's going to appreciate it at the level of someone that calls themselves a collector, that wants to collect something that you've made, a piece of your
Yeah.
art, which your whips absolutely are. There's no question they are functional art. And yeah, that I could see a lot of pride in that. So,
Thank you.
congratulations. Absolutely.
Thanks.
And it looks like from this article, this was the Rural Weekly back in 2017 was the article I found about you. They were saying that just 5 years after you started making whips at age 19, like
Mm.
that is becoming successful pretty quickly.
Mm.
It seems. Did it
I
feel
was
like
married.
that?
I was married at 19 too. I was married,
Okay.
so you know they're very different. Very different kettle of fish back then. You know, men often got married younger,
Yeah,
men and women. Uh, so there was that responsibility uh, to be a provider, I suppose.
sure. I could see that.
Mm. And it's a
Um,
hard area to start off with, because whips are very hard on the joints. I don't know, as you can see, you see my
oh,
finger.
is that arthritis?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, yeah. So that's the thing that's creeping in now. It's arthritis. If anything stops me, it'll be my fingers.
ouch. Do you have any
Mm.
suggestions for whip makers today that are getting started on how to help protect their bodies?
Hmm. I've often wondered about that. I think, for one, just be mindful of it. Secondly, try to use your hands differently each day. Try not to just get bogged down in doing one particular job. Break up your workload a bit. Uh,
Mm.
and the other thing is just the old-fashioned finger exercises, keeping your fingers supple and trying not to probably persist too long. Once your hands start getting
Oh
creep into
no.
your creep into your wrists, probably time to give it up for the day. They're the sort of things I should have done. Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
Do you find yourself doing more of those exercises today to keep yourself limber?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have to. I mean, I don't have a choice these days. Um, and diet. I mean, things
Mm.
like the thing I found recently was apple cider vinegar. It's great for arthritis.
Is that right? My
Mm.
mom takes
It's
it
been.
for a different problem,
Mm. Oh, it's
and it
great for a number of things.
it helps with not getting sore. Does it help with arthritis specifically, or
I think it helps reduce the acidity levels in your body, which in turn
oh,
work on inflammation.
right? So if you're doing the repetitive task, which would cause
Yeah,
inflammation in those joints, even if you're just starting, like that, it could potentially help early on as well.
yeah. Keeping your pH in check, daily, each day, starting your day with apple cider vinegar. It's a nice way to reduce some of that acidity.
Excellent. That's a great tip.
Mm.
Hopefully, whip makers will heed that
Mm.
and learn from
Well,
other people's
that's
mistakes.
yeah. Well, that's my current. That's that's my current bit of doctoring, I suppose. Trying that one out. Different creams I've found. Years ago, I had a thing called carpal tunnel, which is a
Yes.
restriction of the carpal sheath that surrounds the carpal nerve. Um, I had the operation on that, and it was quite successful. I got great relief from that. But then, about 4 or 5 years later, the arthritis in the fingers started to slowly creep in. So that's what I battle with now. Times I have to have a few days off. Um,
Sure, sure.
mm.
And does it impact your painting as well? or are you able? Is that a good way to switch out if you go to painting instead? Oh, may have.
I mean, there's none of those whips. I'm having to apply a lot of tensile factors, so I'm pulling hard on strands. Painting doesn't have any of those requirements.
Oh, that's good. It allows you to
Mm,
continue to do your passion each day. It sounds.
yeah. The thing is, though, when I'm painting, I wish I was making whips, and when I'm making whips, I usually think about painting. It's a bit like that. One feeds the other.
Yes.
Mm.
Um, Looking at some of the work you've done that I found online, you made a replica Henderson whip. So it's a
Mm.
36 plat for Adam.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, maybe, yeah, for Adam.
how did that go? Was there a lot of challenge to that? And was that hard on your
Oh,
body? Because my goodness.
absolutely. It was quite a challenge. Uh, in the original Henderson model that Henderson made, which is it's an outstanding whip, he was probably also one of the people I admired.
Mm,
Cecil Henderson and his iconic whips in David Morgan's Whips and Whip Making. Uh, they were always the thing that captured my eye first thing in the morning. So they played a big part in that inspiration. But looking at Henderson's work was definitely an inspiration. Sorry, what was the question again?
yeah, that's basically answers the question. Thank you.
Mm.
I was just asking what it was like to try to replicate such a intricate whip
Oh,
like that, and
right.
how hard it
That's
was
right.
on you.
Back to the 36 strander. Yes, in the Henderson model, he dropped the 36 strands. He dropped them probably about here, this section in the transition.
Oh, so
So he
pretty
went
early.
from 36 to 34 there. In the one I made, because I couldn't see that in the photo, it wasn't that clear. I continued the 36 strands down to about um, 2/3 the length.
Oh my.
Yeah,
So you
so
tapered those down very fine.
yeah, or maybe a little bit shorter than that, but quite a way. And the main challenge was the actual plaiting itself. It was only a 4-seam whip, so it wasn't that hard to plait. But it's the unraveling when you've got 36 strands that are each around 30 feet long. That's a lot of lace
Yeah,
to
it's a rat's
unravel.
nest.
Yeah, every time you do 10 or 20 passes in your plaiting, then you've got to unravel all those strands. So that was the challenge. It was a very, very monotonous and
I
time
bet.
consuming.
Do you make the little bundles on each of the laces? Like I know they call them a
No,
tamale.
no,
No?
it's funny you say that. I've never tried it. I've always persevered in the traditional sense. I mean, I've always stuck to working off a hook.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing is I've never really gravitated to many tools. I don't. What do you, I only started sizing the strands in the last few years. Sizing was never a part of our discipline here. So things like sizing is more of a recent thing. Strands were more cut out first go.
Wow.
Yeah,
And for those higher plat counts, you have to be so accurate. Does
yeah.
that just come
Well,
through experience?
that's how Henderson would have made that whip of his. That wouldn't have been sized. He would have just cut it out as it was and plaited it. And he didn't split his strands.
Wow. That's
Mm.
I'm a bit speechless trying to imagine doing that myself. That I have a hard enough time with the 16 plat ones that I've tried. My goodness, it
Yes.
feels like I bet when you go back to a 16 or even like a 12 plat indie, it just probably you feel like in 10 minutes you finish the whole thing.
Yes. Yeah. That they're much quicker. But even those 12 and 16 plat whips, they're becoming more time consuming for me. Once I would have knocked out one of them in a day or two. Now it's can be days, even weeks. It's just become much slower.
Is that because of the arthritis, or are you
Yeah,
focusing on?
mainly the arthritis, and I think the other thing over time, I've become more. I put more focus on attention to detail. So that's the other factor.
Speaking of that detail, one of the things that has always stood out to me on your whips in particular is your fall hitch.
Okay.
Just beautiful. Almost looks like you've taken a mechanical pen and drew on the lines of how it was exactly knotted on there. It's so wonderful. Um, has that
It's
been
funny.
a
It's funny you say that. I had a person um, accuse me of that once. It was a
what?
funny statement.
No
Thought
way.
thought that it was a tube of leather with cuts in it.
No.
Yeah.
That did you send it to him and offer him to unlace it?
No,
Unlace it himself.
I mean, he doesn't have that delusion now, of course, but that was often a common statement.
Wow.
Mm.
How has that progressed over time and changed? And from when you were early on with making your whips, were they always a point of your focus, or?
No, I think things like the internet have brought attention to detail into focus, because there's a lot more whips out there to look at, a lot more whip makers,
Mhm.
posting their work, and I think that's added a lot of interest to that detail because there's more competition.
I see. I see.
Mm.
So that you
Yeah,
kind of compare your work to others.
well, not so much to others, but I don't really compare myself. It's more like I see something and that'll inspire me to do something myself.
Challenge yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I, I suppose I've always I challenge myself probably more than anything.
So I noticed you do the reverse on your hitches,
The reverse half hitch.
the
Yep.
reverse half hitch, yeah, instead of the forward
Mm,
hitch, which in theory would lay flatter, but doesn't lock in over time, and theory could come loose.
mm, yeah.
Um, can you
Yeah.
talk
So
about your?
originally got that fall fastening. Was quite common when I started. People like Cecil Henderson used it. With the last hitch, he would feed it up under the loop in the fall,
Yeah.
which is what you often see. Um, with mine, as you can see, I don't. I
Oh, you don't.
No, I don't. It doesn't come over
It
those.
just
I
comes
put it
straight
up.
out.
I put it under the lot. So that last hitch, instead of going through the eye of the fall, it goes up under the lot. But the way I get it down so fine, I compress the fall before I attach it with a piece of artificial sinew, and that allows me to fit all that in that little small space.
I don't understand what you mean by that. You
Ah,
press the fall with artificial sinew. Can you?
where the fall attachment goes on, where you cut that little eye through the fall, that
Yeah.
area there where the hitch goes on, um, I compress that area with a piece of artificial sinew. I wrap it round very tightly, uh, which gives you far more compression than if you just tied the knot straight onto it.
Oh, okay. So
So I get it down a bit smaller.
I see. I see. So you're compressing the fall. Here, let me on this picture. Let me share it again, just so I because that's a fascinating detail. So inside of these hitches, obviously
Hmm.
this is the hitch here at the top,
Yeah,
and this is it coming out the bottom. So inside under these hitches, this fall material has been heavily compressed by all these knots.
yeah. The fall itself.
The
Yeah.
fall itself. So you do you wrap it many wraps around it, or do you tight
I,
knots or
I
snip
only,
them down?
yeah, I only compress it for about that inch where the fall fastening goes on. When I come to that area, when I'm pulling the fall through after I've tied the knots, I will cut that loose, which leaves a nicely compressed area for the knot to sit into.
I see. Wow.
It just allows me to get that, so much more into a smaller space.
I can really see how your experience over time, just working on each of these, seemingly small details, really pays off to create such a beautiful, sleek product here.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow. That is really excellent. I'm stunned. I have another image here. Which one is this? And it doesn't want to open. But yeah, we have a number of examples here. I think this was. Let me show the video of while we're talking about the way that it functions there. I have a video of Keith rolling the whip back and forth. He probably sent you some of these. So this is obviously Keith Smith. If anyone doesn't know who he is, you should follow. But I think looking at a video like this, you can see how the transition tension has tapered as well. It's such a beautiful, get like right somewhere like that. You can just see just how wonderfully it flows. It's almost like it's alive, like looking at a snake.
Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations. I mean, that is just a work of art.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, there's another one. And not to mention, seeing what Keith can do with it is always impressive.
Yeah.
Seeing him nail that.
Yeah, he's impressive, that's for sure.
Yeah, I like this one. I don't know if the sound's coming through, but he just takes the bottle cap right off. Like what?
Yeah, it's amazing.
And that takes, you have to braid so perfectly straight. Your seams and all your layers must be just laser precision for him to be able to do that with it. My goodness. Do you have any tips on? I know I sometimes struggle to keep my seams straight. How do you do that? How do you, from like especially from belly to belly to overlay? What are the tricks to make sure this rolls out perfectly straight like that?
Probably getting your preparations right in the first place. I mean, setting up preparations are everything. So if you're preparing your materials in a systematic order, in good order, the outcome's usually better. Getting uniformity in your foundation layers is really important, and keeping that compression so that it's like plaiting on a piece of timber. You try to get it that hard so that you're plaiting. So plating is always going to be better if it's plaited around a firm object.
Okay. So when you're talking about preparation, it's layers that you're focusing on as a whole, or are we talking about like literally lace beveling down to splitting the strands? I was curious about how on the preparation. You said it's really about the preparation to make sure that it rolls out straight. What are is
and
that
getting the compression right? I would say when you look at a whip, you want compression, but you also want flexibility. So there's that fine line between having something incredibly rock solid, but also flexible enough for it to move like a whip. So they're the two aspects I take into consideration. On principle, if your foundation is as firm as you can make it, then your overlay will be much neater. And you usually get a straighter seam as a result.
Okay. I know that I'm still not an extremely experienced whip maker at all. When I'm plaiting and it's stiff, and I mean freshly plaited leather, it'll hold its own shape quite well.
Yeah.
It's always intimidating to think that this is too stiff. I know it's got to break in, and as you get that more and more weight out there on the end, you need that to be stiff for the action. Is that just come with experience that it's supposed to be this stiff right now?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it is. It's a thing I've experienced. Also, the other factor in a lot of our whips, and not just mine, some of us work with all kangaroo in
Yeah.
our foundations are made up. So we don't, for instance, I don't use chrome split or any calf skin as a bolster. My whip is 100% kangaroo, so it has a bit more. It is firmer. It's less flexible, but that all breaks in time. So one of the things you notice is when you pick up a whip that's been made with cattle hide as a bolster,
Hmm.
the whip wants to lay out perfectly straight away because it's soft, it's supple, it's
Much more so, yeah.
yeah. So it's very very responsive. Um, kangaroo hide, all kangaroo hide whips have that little bit of breaking in time to soften. So that's the major difference. Um, but also retain their firmness over a period of time. So the whip you can go out and use it all day, and it's not going to become overly soft.
Do you find any sort of when you finish plaiting and shellacking and so forth, and you're ready,
Hmm.
you're done? Do
Yeah.
you do any sort of break in yourself before you send it to a customer, or you do let them do it from the very
Hmm.
beginning? Get out there and crack it.
No, I try to keep the whip in as good a presentable state as possible. So I don't do a lot with it. Most of the time, I just want to check that it's got a nice rollout. That's what I look for. So if it ticks that box, I send it off. I don't go to a lot of trouble trying to break people's whips in for them. I think
Okay.
that's something they have to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have heard different people talk about different ways that they like to break it into, so I guess they can do it
Really?
their own way. Some people will be more aggressive with their hands to work it up and down, and others just want to use it the way you would normally use it,
Mm.
let it break into the way that you use it. That is
Naturally.
our
I
tradition.
always advise people let them break in naturally
Okay.
uh, without having to, bend them and throw them around. Let them break in naturally. If they've been made well, they should break in nicely all on their own.
Do you think, temperature helps it break in at all? Being out it
Um,
working it
I,
out in
I, I wonder, maybe warmer, like a lot of things, it might be more pliable over time. I simply don't. I've never really studied what the difference is on a cold day or a warm day.
it'd be interesting. I should ask some of the other
Yeah,
interviewees. That's a question I
that's
could
an
explore.
interesting question. There, I've never thought about it.
Okay.
Mm.
I do know that, like, soap and lard and various greases, they get more solid, obviously, as they're cold.
Yes,
So I wonder
yeah,
how that, we use so much plaiting soap while we're in its permeated
yes.
leather. It
Well,
has to.
that was the area I was thinking on. We use a lot of them are permeated with beeswax also.
Yeah.
So beeswax, as we know, as it's colder, it becomes hard and solid, and as
Yeah,
you
yeah.
warm it, becomes more. Maybe there is a component of less flexibility in a warm whip. Definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. What sort of, plaiting soap versus, conditioning soap and so forth do you recommend for whip makers these days?
Yeah. Um, no, that's another interesting question. I don't use plaiting soap. Uh,
No.
I I use I use Dubbin,
Ah,
uh, and then I use fine talc. I use
talc.
one's for traction, and the other one's for slippage. So you've got something that pulls up nice and tight, and I get the best results with using those two. So if I'm going to work on a whip, for
Wow.
example, say if I just cut a whip out and I'm working on it tomorrow, I'd apply Dubbin in the afternoon, uh,
Okay.
so it has a time to solidify overnight, and it creates a nice waxy surface.
Yeah.
And then I use the fine baby talc over the top of that.
Okay. So after it's
Mm.
soaked in and a
Yeah.
bit dried, I have noticed some brands, it will get almost sticky as it begins to dry, the
Yes.
plaiting. conditioning, and that it's very frustrating to try to work with that.
Yes, yeah, and that's why I let mine sit overnight. I let it, solidify.
Okay,
Uh,
and then
so it's yeah, and it's
lock in.
those two components together. Um, it allows me to get a little bit tighter
Hmm.
without having to put so much tension on it.
How did you come up with that? Was it recommended by anyone else, or is this
Trial and error.
right,
Trial and error.
Tony Nugent?
Yeah, it's funny. It probably started my adventure with Telk. Started off talking to Chris Barr at a we're at a, I think it's in 2010 at a convention,
Okay.
and I asked him at the time how what he was planning with, and he told me it was Telk. So I thought I'd give Telk a try, and I've stuck with it since. It
I'm
tends
gonna
to
have to.
work.
Yeah,
Combining the two together,
yeah,
I haven't found a better way of plaiting.
I'm going to try it. Yeah, I
Mm.
was so frustrated. I made a snake web the other day, and it was so sticky. So I was getting to where I was just greasing like 8 inches at a time before I plait it, and because it was drying and getting gooey, I was like,
Ah, yeah. Well, that'd be frustrating, Christian. That'd frustrate me. When I started, I used to make my own plaiting soap, which was made up of uh, sheep fat. Suet.
yeah, yeah,
You're familiar with the word suet?
yes.
So it was made up of suet. Uh,
Oh,
we're back.
we are back. So you were saying that you originally were making your own
Yeah,
plaiting soap with suet?
yeah. I made my own plaiting soap, so I'd always use a double boiler on the stove, make a big mess,
Oh
um,
yes.
make 12 months of plaiting soap, and now I don't have to worry about it. So it's good.
Yeah, yeah, I bought pretty good container of the Pappy's Dubbin, and it's just wonderful stuff.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
it's
Pappies.
Pappy's is the brand I bought
Yeah.
the Dubbin. I like it. Is there a particular brand that you like for
Yeah.
the Dubbin?
Yeah. I'll show you. Hang
Yeah,
on.
I'd love to see it.
That's what
Oh,
I'm using at the moment,
sure.
which it
Okay.
says shoe polish, but it's a natural dubbin. Um,
Okay.
it's just a commercially available dubbin. Uh, there's nothing fancy about it, but it works well for what I use.
I will give it a try. Yeah, the Pappy's
Hmm.
is a bit grainy. So
What
but
do you mean,
it's
drainy? Hmm.
it has bits in it. It feels like it's not melted.
Ah, oh, okay. More viscous.
It's like it is viscous, yes, but there
Hmm.
are individual bits that are not properly mixed.
Wow.
Um, and they it's like this small little beads of one material and another bead of another. But it works. It smears all around and mashes together. So, uh, but yeah, no, I'll try that. It looks like if shoe polish would have to be very smooth and
Hmm.
clear to work for shoes.
Yeah. Well, this going on looking at this, I'd say this is more for waterproofing boots. It's
Ah,
got
okay.
beeswax. It says waterproof, nourishes the leather with natural waxes. So that's what I use as a base. That's more or less a base that I use to plait
Okay.
with. Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Once I
you
start plaiting, I just put a little bit of talc on it, work a bit more talc, and then work down it like that.
You don't feel like you need to come in with some heavy lard and make that
No,
core really juicy?
no, I probably wouldn't get it as tight. I wouldn't get the same tension, and I
Okay.
wouldn't necessarily get the same uniformity.
I see.
So all that makes a difference. Your plaiting soap probably is a big part of it. I mean, if you're using just plain plaiting soap, for instance, which is quite oily, it tends to want to grip in places. Uh,
Right.
so the slippage component isn't there as good. With talc, and the talc I'm using, it's a very fine, it's a baby talc, uh, and it's almost like an oil. It's that fine.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah. So it really,
Yeah,
and what you don't have to worry about drying up either,
yeah.
because
Mm.
it's by definition it's a dry material.
So the wax, the waxy substance underneath, that gives you, so you got traction and slippage. They're the two components that you need for a good plaiting soap.
Right.
Mm.
Wonderful.
Mm.
Um. So, I mean, obviously, it sounds like you're still extremely active with making these. Yet you mentioned that you were semi-retired,
Yeah.
perhaps, but still continuing on to refine your method. I mean, you just made this beautiful whip for Keith. Um, do you see yourself still taking orders if someone wants to contact you after hearing you
Yeah.
talk today?
Yes. Yeah. No, I still take, I still take commissions. I just don't take them I just don't take as many as I used to.
Not gonna be stocking a bunch of saddlery shops anymore.
No, no, I don't think I've walked into a saddlery in 30 years or more.
Oh my goodness.
Mm.
I did have a couple other just kind of random questions. We've mentioned Adam and Keith. Are there other
Mm.
whip crackers that you follow that inspire you that you
Oh,
enjoy
yeah. Oh,
watching?
there's an assortment of them. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I love watching Todd Rex is another one.
Oh,
Uh,
Todd is amazing. His
you know,
tosses.
he's amazing. He's probably one of the first whip crackers I saw online that really intrigued me. His versatility with a whip is amazing.
Yes, I actually took his class at the LA WhipCon on whip tosses.
Oh, you're very lucky, lucky man.
I feel lucky. He's an excellent
Mm.
teacher. If you have a chance to come to LA one year, I would highly recommend doing that.
Yeah,
He's a great teacher, and just a wonderful guy. Are there other
yes,
people that inspire you?
yeah. Well, there are a lot of them I see all the time. Um, young the young man Ian that won
Ian
the
Cameron?
yeah Ian Cameron that won the recent whip crackers.
Yes, yeah, the LA,
Yeah, yeah,
WhipCon.
the LA whip cracker. Yeah, I watch his stuff. So his is coming on very interesting. His works whip cracking's developing quite well.
It is. He's such a
Mm.
powerful cracker as well.
Yeah.
In person,
Mm.
he has so much strength and control, but a very powerful crack.
Yes, absolutely.
How
So
would you
I'm looking at whip crackers from time to time for sure.
how would you make a whip different for someone like Ian that you can see that does this very fast arrowheads and has its four corners and
Mm.
such a powerful crack? Would you need to change anything you think when you make something for someone like that?
Um, not really. I think what I look at is talking to the person, finding out off them firsthand what are the qualities they like in a whip. They're the things I try to duplicate, try to copy into my whips.
Ah,
Um, length of Turk's head, length of fall, uh, the taper in the whip, uh, how wide the whip is at its fattest point, how wide the diameter is. For instance, for a sports whip, it's 14 mil. So that's just
yeah.
standard size for sports whips. Things like that. That's what I'd want to know. What's the weight and shape of the whip you like? Uh,
Okay. So
mm,
have really tap on their experience that they've used and
yeah,
try to
yeah,
make it.
yes.
Um,
And so it's a kind of collaboration in a sense with the whip maker and the buyer. I mean, it has to be.
yeah. Yeah. It's
Mm.
something I'm still learning as well. And do you find sometimes, how shall I say, offering too much advice is a bad thing? Or,
Well, it can be only because if you're offering too much advice, people usually don't recollect it. They don't take it on board. It just,
hmm,
it's overkill.
sure, sure. I guess that makes sense.
Hmm.
Do you have any? anything that you're going to be looking to? I don't want to say change, as if something's wrong, but do you
Mm.
have goals that you're still aspiring to as a whip maker and an artist? Something you're hoping
Uh,
to achieve?
yes, probably because my retirement is becoming more imminent. I'm looking more into more decorative whips. So I've got another stock whip on the go here at the moment,
Ooh,
which it'll be two-tone and 64 strands. So
oh,
I want to make a few more like that.
oh! How I cannot wait to see that. It's going to be beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah, I look forward. Hopefully, the owner will be happy to let everyone see it. I know
So
some
I
people
um
private.
I tend to use graph paper. So it all starts with graph paper. The artwork starts on graph paper, then I convert it to the overlay.
Do you find like on a stock whip? I was talking to I believe it was Chris Barr about setting up the spiral method so that you can go through and use your graph paper. So you spiral one color and then go back and interweave the other.
With spiral braid. Well, you can do it that way. Um,
Do you
Spiral
do
braids probably better for lots of strands, for multiple strands, over 36 strands. Spiral braids probably more efficient in that way. It depends on the type of pattern you're going to plait into your whip.
so like if you're just doing
Yeah,
some bands and
that's
so forth, you would.
yeah. That'll be up to at the time. The complexity of the design will show me how to make it.
Okay, okay.
Mm.
So you just have that experience and you kind of know which way would be the
Yeah, it's more likely than not it'll be a spiral braid.
okay.
Mm.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, so with the, I mean, obviously we've really dove deep into the whip making here, but you have mentioned painting. Can you tell me a little bit about your painting or any other hobbies and passions that you have? I'm very interested to know more about you and what makes you makes you tick here.
Well, painting. It's like my whip making, I suppose. It's a um,
Do you take them on commission as well? Like someone
I,
comes to you and
I have painting. I would paint a body of work and exhibit it. Uh, that's usually how I go about it with
okay,
painting, and then sell the work from exhibits.
well, excellent,
Mm,
excellent. That's
mm.
um, I would
It's a lot more involved than that. It's a very complex area to go into
okay.
painting. Mm.
The shades are closed.
My Alexa's talking to us. Apologize.
Oh,
Uh, the so when you're trying to express yourself through painting, do you have
mm.
other inspirations there that um, sometimes lend to just needing to be painted? Do you have
Yeah,
other artistic expressions that you're looking to?
social. Yeah, social commentary is an area that interests me in painting.
Oh, interesting.
Mm. Yeah.
What sort of social?
Well, you're
Commentary?
familiar with the work of artists like Banksy's one. His work's very commentary. It's
I am.
very, yeah. Uh, work with a meaning,
Mhm.
something other than just a pretty picture.
Okay, so that you can have people think about particular topics.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, like the work. Can you see the work behind me on the
I
wall?
can. It looks like
Yeah.
a river or a bay.
Hmm. Well,
I
that
can.
was more or less that was painting about looking at the bush through a bird's eye. You know.
Oh, yeah. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, very talented all around.
So I made an exhibition based on through the bird's eye.
I see. I see.
Hmm.
And what sort of commentary do you feel like you were trying to say, or what sort of things did you hear people get out of that exhibit, for example?
Um, I really couldn't answer that. I mean, I couldn't answer what someone else got out of it. Overall, I had some really nice feedback from the exhibit. I think it was probably looking at the landscape in a different format. For instance, in that picture, I've laid the landscape out flat, trying to imagine how a bird might view the landscape.
Sure. Yeah, I could see that. It has almost a sense of motion too. The more you look at it,
Yeah, and
it,
and there's and can you see in the foreground there's a thing called an artificial eyrie along the coast here. We've erected them for birds like the osprey, which were quite endangered here. So we erected these artificial eyries, and in this case, it almost has like a crown of thorns presence. You know, it has that crucifixion kind of component in it. So that's what I tried to paint.
wonderful, wonderful. That you're truly a man of many talents.
Thanks.
That is just excellent. If someone wants to order a whip from you or commission a painting, perhaps, would be the best way for someone to get in contact with you these days?
Probably just contact me. I don't publish I don't publish a price list because most of my work varies so much. It's hard to put a price on it. Most of my commissions are quite diverse in what's needed. So what it's very hard to itemize whips like 64 strands and 36 strands or whatever. Yeah, so that they'll contact me. I'll ask them what they want, and I'll give them a price on that.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I definitely have some things I'd like to talk to you about as well after the show.
You're welcome.
So like Facebook Messenger or email, those sort of things. Just
yeah.
And
well, I do very little social comment. I mean, I do very little. I don't look at Facebook. I very rarely look at Facebook. I look at Instagram for a little bit each day. People can contact me on Messenger. I'm still contactable on Messenger, and go from there.
Okay, I'll be sure to put the link in the show as well. If someone wants to commission you for some work, I'll make sure that they have the way to get hold of you.
Talking to the person's important because that gives me an idea, much better idea, talking to the person and what they require, what they like.
Are you usually able to do it in one conversation, or is it the sort of thing that needs to develop over time?
Well, it can. It can be something. I might need a few conversations with them to know exactly what they want, or they might be deciding on certain components. That might need discussing, or if it's sometimes every now and then I'll have a whip that I have for sale. Sometimes that might come up. So that happens rarely, but occasionally I will have a whip here to sell.
Okay. Do you have a long waiting list these days?
Can be up to anything up to 6 months or a year.
Okay.
Depending. At present, I have very little work on, so it's good.
Okay.
I could do something much quicker.
Everybody should jump on that while the iron's hot here.
Yeah.
Well, Tony, thank you so much. You have been just a wealth of knowledge, and I know it's been a bit of a scheduling nightmare for us to get together, and I appreciate your patience. And
you're welcome.
Your time.
Thanks, Christian.
Absolutely, and hopefully you don't mind me bugging you with more whip making questions.
No, you're welcome anytime. Yeah,
I love it, and it is there's so much to learn, and every time as soon as we hit end, I think of 100 more questions I should have asked you. And
yes, and I think of 100 more ways I could have answered them. That's the other thing. Yeah.
Are there any other topics or comments that you would like to part the show with, or other things you'd like to talk about?
Not that I can think of at the moment. I'll probably think about it after you've left.
Exactly. If we need to add another segment, we can do. For those that are watching all the episodes of the episode with Chris Barr, there was some technical problems on his, and part of it was messed up, and we actually got together another time on the next day, and we thought of some
great.
more questions that he thought of and I thought of, so we actually just,
Wow,
that's possible.
Way to go. I think that sounds like a good approach. I'll think about it. Yeah.
So you think of something, let me know.
Yeah.
We'll add it.
I'll have to look at Chris Barr's interview. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Wonderful. Yeah, he's a great guy as well.
Yeah.
So once again, Tony, thank you so much for being on the show. And as I mentioned to everyone at the end of these, that I do have a donate button on the WhipChatPodcast.com. If you guys could help us keep me on the air, I'd appreciate it. It does.
Okay.
It does take a bit of income to keep this going, but I'll be doing it regardless. It's my passion to talk to you guys and learn how to do this. And order a whip from Tony, and you can definitely get a work of art. So keep on cracking, Tony.
Okay, mate.
Yep. Thank you. Hey, it's Christian. Just want to thank Tony again for being on the podcast and for answering all my questions and going over in such detail all the processes he used in his history there. Thank you so much, Tony. Remember, if you want to support the podcast, you can go to whipchatpodcast.com/donate, and it could really help me keep the show on the air. And as I always say at the end of all these shows, remember to keep on cracking.